On corporate organograms, it might look like a lean, mean business machine, but with cost cuttings being front of mind, your staff are almost definitely running on empty. Tired and demotivated staff won't be able to drive innovation and big ideas. We look at some smart ways that you can motivate your workforce now. Joining us now at the desk, Marius Meyer, CEO of the South African Board of Practitioners, and Tracey Proudfoot from Stoke. Welcome to you both. I suppose a fitting conversation for a Friday when some people are looking at their watches saying it's T-minus 3 hours and 30 minutes till I can go home. Tracey, I'll start with you. Your views on perhaps the traditional workforce and why it's not suited to making people productive and happy employees.
I think the traditional workforce has changed a lot over the last 10 years, and what we're looking at now is people are trying to motivate the traditional workforce in the way that they were motivated 50, 100 years ago, and it's simply not working anymore. It's ways of finding different ways of motivating people, and what we're seeing now is it's all about engaging people and looking at their attitude. So it's been seen as the soft and fuzzy things to do. You know, we say, oh, let's throw another braai, or hey guys, you know, let's have drinks on a Friday. That's going to motivate, but it really doesn't. It's not engaging people enough and challenging people. So some of the key things that we need to be looking at is, do people have a choice in what they do, how they do it? And specifically Gen Yers are determining that they need to have a choice in how they operate. The other thing is there enough challenge for them? And it seems like a really small thing, but for managers to constantly be giving feedback and setting that challenging bar to say, let's see how this can work, let's try a little harder, what do you need to do here? And so that engaging with the workforce on more personal issues and personal basis is really the way to go, as opposed to saying, well, I'll pay you 10 Rand more if you push out a couple more of the widgets that we need you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just looking at the article that was in FinWeek this week, it was very much also focused on you need to have short-term goals, because otherwise for some people you come to work and it's the same task every day and there's no end in sight, and you know, ultimately people are going to be looking at, you know, what they're doing after work, what they're doing on the weekend, and exciting things they're planning. You have to keep them in the moment, and by that you have to keep them motivated, and through a short-term goal you can do that.
That's exactly right. And I think often we lose focus of that. So they put the short-term goals as in the short-term business goals, forgetting about the people that are actually working towards that. So what do the people need to do in those short-term goals? What are some of the things that they see for themselves within those short-term goals? And as human beings, we love a challenge. You put any, you know, why do people cycle, run, jog, dive, do whatever they do over weekends? It's because that's the challenge. It's engaging in that. And if we don't have a challenge in your workforce, what do people come to work to do? And when you see that attitude creep coming in, so the bad attitude, it's usually because they don't have enough challenge and they don't have any choice in how they go about achieving what they need to achieve. And that really comes down to how we manage people.
Marius, what's your advice for employers in how to keep people happy at work?
Well, I think it's critical to have a clear engagement strategy where companies focus on knowing the employees, knowing what their needs are, because at the end it's an individual coming to work. He does not leave his home life at home. So you need to look at individuals holistically and say, what are their needs? How can you utilize their knowledge and skills and talents that they really enjoy what they do at work, because they spend most of their time at work. So it's about looking at their needs and then developing interventions that can address their concerns and their issues, and helping them to be engaged and to be motivated, to feel this is something to reach for in terms of achieving objectives and to really achieve their own performance targets.
Mark, what's your experience of this? I mean, you're someone who has to deal with many different employees and everyone's got their own kind of personal life story. What's your experience?
Well, managing journalists is lots of fun. Anyway, we'll stick that problem aside for the moment. I mean, long and short of it, last couple of years, workforce has been shredded. I mean, you've seen cost cutting left, right, and centre. All the nice, you know, all the soft and fluffy, even the corporate braais and that kind of thing. They've been cut back on, so there's very little release of tension. Very often you've now got employees coming to work and they are working flat out, they're working longer, they're working harder, and
they're doing three people's jobs also as opposed to one.
Yeah, it's the lean mean fighting machine. And you know, often that gets managed via PowerPoint and that kind of thing, where people say, well, you've got the resource, I don't understand why it can't happen. But you say, well, I had 3 times the number of resources 2 years ago, and now I'm trying to produce the same kind of output or perhaps more. And I think that one of the things that came through quite clearly from this Harvard article was actually to make goals a game. So I mean, talking about short-term goals. So you're saying, I suppose, specifically want to reach 100 sales of a certain widget, or I want to get 500 subscriptions. And creating a little bit of gaming around what you're doing here is a very nice way to build some team spirit around short-term goals.
I think we're dealing with it's a new normal. I mean, you're definitely not going to be in the position now with companies battling to actually meet their targets where they're able to put bonuses in place. So I think that changes the shift in terms of what corporates can do to actually motivate their employees. I think you're also dealing with an employee base that is scared. How do you motivate somebody who's actually wondering whether they're going to have a job in the next week and they're going to suffer a retrenchment? Because it changes their mindset to short-termism.
Yeah.
Why should they invest so much of their life where they don't have that job security anymore?
Yeah, and I think it's also the I mean, when you live in that environment of fear, you're always number one. There's no bigger goal to this. I'm worrying about number one. I work to exactly what the number of hours that I'm going to do, and I'm too scared to go and make big suggestions because nobody's going to back me on it because we're so sort of hunkered down trying to just survive. And I think that that defeats people. People want to create things. They want to feel like they're contributing to something.
How does this concept apply to, say, the manufacturing industry, where you've got workers along a production line, or the mining industry, where we've seen a lot of unrest? How does the concept of short-term goals and employee happiness and productivity apply here?
It applies, and according to one of our clients, Ben Magara from Anglo, he said that it's even more important to look at employee happiness with miners, with the workforce that you're talking about, than it is with some of your corporate workforces, because that's what they're living with every single day. To them, their job is what they go to, and it's what they're almost escaping to. They go to work to escape some of the hardships that they are facing at home. So if we can engage with them and get them happier at work, and get them feeling like they're accomplishing and achieving at work, it's going to mean a massive change in the way that they look at their home lives as well. And I think one of the interesting factors...
So how does the Anglo, to talk to us about that example at Anglo, give us an example of the kind of tools that they're applying there to engage with their workers more.
So one of the things that they did, and I think it's just an amazing example of bringing management and showing, one of the key things that we look at is that management really needs to listen to their work staff, and that is one-on-one as well as in a bigger group as well. If I feel that I've got a voice and I can raise issues, I'm going to be contributing more because my management is listening to me, so I'll have more ideas. So a small thing that they did was they arranged on a particular shift that the senior executives would be there. It was a cold winter's day. They were there and they served soup, and then listened to people as they were drinking their soup and having their bread rolls. What is really going on? What are they concerned about? And they were there for every single change of shift for 24 hours. That shows
change in attitude post that?
Immediately you started seeing some sort of engagement where people were going, they really are interested, they really do care. They don't just sit in Joburg and not even interested in coming out. They want to be engaged with us.
I think there's another example, and I think we've used it before on the show, at Anglo Gold, where one of the things was there was no personalisation of the lockers of the miners, and so you had no interest in the person standing next to you. You didn't see the door opening and seeing here's the picture of his family. You just saw it as a nameless, faceless person working next to you.
Just the number, basically.
Basically the number. And when somebody dies in an accident, well, it's a number. It sounds very disingenuous, but that's the reality. You're treated as labour, as a commodity. And I think one of the things that I know Anglo Gold implemented was an ability to personalise your locker. It sounds like a really soft skill, but it's something there that gives somebody this belief that the person standing next to me is a human being, not a commodity that's replaceable. It's somebody that when I go down underground, I'm actually there to support this person.
So how do we weigh that up against the fact that we've got a wildcat strike there today?
Yeah, look, I think you got to look at we touched on it a little bit earlier on about why these people are angry, and exactly to this, it's an escape. You're going to work to escape the reality that you are drowning in debt. You cannot keep up with it. You cannot take your kids put your kids through school. It's an unhappy, angry workforce, and you've got to try and find this. We've said it before that you cannot take, if you're not going to manage the staff, if you simply see your staff as a number, you're not going to manage these. These people are not going to be incentivized to deliver for you.
Your views on on making the task at hand an enjoyable one at work, because sometimes work just becomes work, and it's something that you have to do because you have to do it every day.
I think it's critical to bring back the fun into work as well. People need to enjoy the job, but there are so many other opportunities of really bringing in the fun that people can see. But there is a sense of humor. There are interesting ways of letting people enjoy and even making jokes about things going wrong, but finding solutions to that as teams. So I think
allowing people to make mistakes.
people need to make mistakes and utilize the teams, because you're not on your own. There are teams who can support you and help you, and management need to walk around and to be visible and to help people to deal during these difficult times. I mean, we all deal with stress, but somehow we need to manage it. We need to ensure that people can still get the best out of the situation.
And I think for managers to engage properly with their staff is an incredibly useful thing in the company itself. If you look at the example of Tesco and Sir Terry Leary, he basically went through and spoke to the person who was packing the shelves. And there's so much learning that you can get out of the staff on the grassroots level that you can actually feed through into your business model. He mentioned actually at the recent Global Leadership Summit that very often the CEO is the last person to know what's actually happening on the ground. And I think there needs to be that engagement between the management and the employees on the ground.
It was also interesting just looking at the article talking about what a crisis can teach us, is that in a crisis situation, humans respond really well. We know how to respond to a crisis. We immediately come together, we brainstorm, we're able to work as a team, we've got a deadline, we know how to, and we're looking for a solution. So perhaps it's this short-term goals, creating a sense of a deadline and creating an end point for the employee.
I'd never want to say, let's create a crisis.
Yeah, you don't want to create a crisis, but you want to get people working optimally.
Exactly. I do get your drift. And I think what we're seeing and what our research is definitely showing, the good news point being a Friday, let's bring in some of that, is that South Africans in general are happier at work than most of the other nations that we've got on our database. And when we looked at that, we thought, wow, that's so puzzling, because overall there's been a lot of statistics that have shown that South Africans are unhappy in general life, and yet why are we happy at work? And one of the key points that we look at is that when we engage at work, we look at and compare to all those people that don't have a job. So you're driving to the road, and sitting at the robot, and there's somebody begging, and you go, man, I'm so lucky I've got a job. As opposed to people in Europe and a couple of other countries that go, oh, we're sorted. We want the biggest job. We want the next job, and they're comparing up, whereas we're comparing down. So instead of looking for the more sexy, the next big thing to do, let's rather start engaging and actually start treating our people more humanely and engaging with our staff and actually putting some work into it ourselves.